नो रियल इंडिया के मेरे सभी साथियों और फॉलोअर्स को जय भीम, नमो बुद्धाय. To all my friends and followers of No Real India account, a very sincere Jai Bhim and Namo Buddhaya. In this video, I want to answer a question that I posted on my Instagram and Facebook story very briefly. Basically, the question I asked on my story was, what did Buddha do after the first occurrence of death in his life? And I gave two options. The first option was he renounced everything and went off seeking the truth. The second option was he did nothing. He just lived his life as he was living before. I know very few of you got the answer right, but many of you did pick that he renounced and went off from his family's home seeking the truth. It was actually a trick question because, and I understand why many people pick renunciation, because it has been fed into our brains that Buddha one fine day, or when he was still Siddhartha, Prince Siddhartha, woke up and one day he saw for the first time in his life an old man, a sick man, perhaps even a poor man, but definitely a dead man or a dead corpse. And then suddenly he realized that, oh my God, this world is full of suffering. I will also go through those phases and there is nothing to live for. And then he goes out to seek truth. I asked this question to show how absurd that thought process is. For one, Buddha knew about death very, very early in his childhood, which is why the answer he did nothing makes sense, because his own mother who gave birth to him died when he was 7 days old. On the 5th day of after his birth, she falls ill as the ceremony, his naming ceremony, is happening. And then 2 days later, she seeks forgiveness and she pleads with her family to let her go because she is due to die, and she just gets an assurance from both her husband and her sister, who becomes the caretaker of Siddhartha to take good care of him. So there, and also Buddha left home to practice asceticism and figure out the truth when he was 29. By that time, he was in the Sangha, in the clan's social body for 9 years. And there have been all sorts of fightings between them and the neighboring clans. And also, he was not hidden behind the palace walls like some other stories say. So there's the answer. Just to answer that question, Buddha basically, not only did he not do anything, he could not do anything. He was a mere baby of 7 days old when the first occurrence of death happened in his life, and that was his mother. Now, the second question which we may want to further think upon is, why did injunctions like these come into place? And for this, I have to go back to what Dr. Ambedkar shares about India's history. As Dr. Ambedkar shares, India's history is nothing but a mortal combat between Brahmanism and Buddhism. So, भारत देश का चरित्र और कुछ नहीं, लेकिन ब्राह्मण और बुद्धिज्म के बीच में हुआ घातक संघर्ष है. So that's it. It's a mortal combat. So there is a group of people who will always suffer, using the word loosely, if Buddhism rises to power. So they have put in all sorts of injunctions to make Buddha, who claimed himself to be a man, to elevate him to a level of God, to show that achieving such kind of greatness is not possible. So the main miscreants who will lose if every one of us follows that path is the Brahminical ideology and the Brahminical followers, the followers of Brahmanism, mainly Brahmins. So it behooves to realize here that they had the power of infiltrating a lot of monasteries through Buddhism, and they also kicked out every other monk who could have shared about Buddhism, the truth about Buddhism, out into the forests, and also massacred them in huge numbers. So then they could then infiltrate and put in all these things of like injunctions, which veer off so very far from what Buddha taught as pertaining to truth, reason, and experience. For crying out loud, we are now in 21st century, and how many of us, with all the advancement in science and medicine and everything, how many of us have even gone to a 2-digit age, like 10 years, without seeing somebody die? That's just absurd. It just doesn't happen. So these are all just techniques and tricks used to kind of remove Siddhartha's life, remove Buddha from the easy reach of common man. And I think the best book that I found to counter all of these arguments is again Buddha and his Dhamma by Dr. Ambedkar. And for those of you who may want to understand why this injunction comes in of that somebody has not seen a sick man, a dead man, a poor man, or an old man, is because it's just the nature of the times back then, where it was common for somebody to give up, to eventually give up their life, a householder to give up his life and move on into an ascetic state when some of these things happen in their life. And it is very clearly shared in a dialogue between a king and a bhikkhu, a monk named Ratapala, who was at that time the youngest monk under Buddha's Sangha, in his Sangha. So in that discussion, the Raja asks Ratapala, why have you, who comes from this very illustrious and wealthiest family in the town, gone away and followed this path of Buddha? And as part of that dialogue, the king asks, usually in our society during these times, the 4 times when somebody goes and follows these paths is if the person himself has grown old and it's like that on the decline, so there's nothing good to do, so you go spend your time in the forest. Or you have lost all your power and money and wealth, and you see no way to build it back up, so it's more like a giving up, and then you go, because it's like, well, it's almost like declaring bankruptcy and going to a forest or something. Or you have become, old, poor, sick. Your health has debilitated so much that you don't see any way of recovering. So you then decide, well, there's no point for me being in society. So you leave. And finally, somebody very, very close to you dies, and you just not get out of such a deep grief that you give up the life and then go in search of solitude, peace, or however you need to deal with grief. So that was the nature of the times as to how people would leave and go. But these, I think, have been attributed to Siddhartha. And not only have they been attributed to him, but also put under the cover of that was the first time he saw, and it's like he couldn't take it, and then he left. He was a very sensible man. If we read Buddha's history, even up until when he was 29 and left home, it was not like he was 13 or 15 or a barely teen or early teens that you could still believe that maybe his dad had in fact held him behind palace walls. I mean, once you hit teenagers, how many of us have ever been able to keep a teenager behind walls and not let them explore the world? That's just absurd. So anyway, the question and the answer is basically Siddhartha was bereft of his mother's love when he was 7 years old. So he had experience of death and loss very early on in his life. So to attribute that he renounced the world when he first realized and saw an old man, a sick man, a poor man, and a dead man is just not true. Hopefully this helped. Again, thanks for those of you who played the quiz game. It was fun for me to see how you responded. And all my knowledge for now comes from 2 really very, very good books, The Essence of Buddhism and The Buddha and His Dhamma by Dr. Ambedkar. And Essence of Buddhism is by Mr. Narasu. I'll give the actual name in the video. Thank you so much for listening, and let me know if you have any other questions. Bye now.